Touch. Thank you, the Swiss, for being present. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing good, that you're not too dead after this day of sessions and of plenaries. Today we'll have a small session. It's quite short. I left some time if you have questions at the end. But even though it's quite short, it's quite personal. So I hope you will enjoy and that you will learn some stuff out of this session. So before we start, I propose you a small exercise. So I will ask you to close your eyes. So close all your eyes. I see that you're cheating, some of you. And I will ask you to think of one person living with a disability. You see that person? So you have that person living with a disability. And once you imagine that person, you are welcome to open your eyes. All good? Did you not fall asleep during this 30 seconds? Okay. So you all have in your head a person living with a disability. I have a question for you. Who thought of someone who was in a wheelchair? If that's the case, can you please raise your hand? Interesting. Who was thinking of someone who was living with Down syndrome? Can you please raise your hand? If you were thinking of both, if you are thinking of Down syndrome and wheelchair, can you raise your hand again? So either Down syndrome, so the two people that raised your hand before, can you all raise your hand so I can just see? Okay? So as we see, when we think of disability, we always think of the same thing. It's always a person living with a disability that is visible, that has some issues, either a motor issue or an issue related to physical issues. But it's actually very often not the case. And to explain this, I will start with a very personal story. I present you my cousins and my aunt and my uncle. I can give their names if you're interested. Catherine, Olivier, Amandine, and Romain. This picture was taken actually 5 years ago. It was the birthday of my aunt, Catherine, who was there. And they were all very happy. We actually went to the Mont Blanc, close to the Mont Blanc with my family. And we're all invited for the birthday of my aunt. And it was a very, very happy day. But a few months after we went to this, I was talking to my aunt. I remember she invited me over lunch, and I was talking with her, and I realized that she was talking very slow to me. And I remember at first I was almost laughing. I was like, why is she talking so slow? I'm not a baby. We speak French. I understand French. So I remember it struck me, and I was, oh, okay, interesting. A few weeks go by, and then I see my aunt trying to give me some water, and she dropped the glass, and I started understanding that something was off. Actually, it's over time that I realized that something happened, actually. So she started losing all senses of her hands. That was the first thing. Then she could not move her arms anymore. She could not move her legs anymore. So she started being in a wheelchair. At one point, she could not speak anymore. She could not do anything anymore. So she was basically in a seat. And yeah, she had to go through that phase for more than 1 year, where she couldn't eat, she couldn't do anything. Fortunately, she had a very interesting technology where she could actually write on WhatsApp. So when I was not with her, I was talking to her on WhatsApp. Like, everything was going well, nothing was an issue. But actually, when I saw her again, she was sick. She was sick. And it's actually not such a long time ago that she passed away from this illness because she could not live anymore like this. And that was the first time it really struck me, the invisible disability, that person, my aunt, my close aunt, was actually living with something that I first was almost mocking because I didn't understand what was happening, and that actually took her away. So that's one of the stories, but there are many other stories like this, because actually invisible disabilities are making up more a bigger part of the disability spectrum. So actually, it is estimated by the World Health Organization that 17% of the global population lives with with a disability. So it means that 1 out of 5 person is disabled. It means that in EGM, it is estimated if we're, I don't remember how many people we are, let's say we are 1,000 people, it means that there's 200 people that are living with a disability. So try to reflect about it. I think it's quite interesting to think about it. But what is very interesting is actually out of all these disabilities, very often it's not visible. We don't see those people. We don't see these stories of people battling in the shadow because it's invisible, as I said. And that really struck me, and I really think it's something that we should be more aware of. So I talk a lot about disability, but I think it's very important to truly understand what is disability, that we have proper definitions. So to start with disability, so I have some of my sources. I will talk a bit more about my sources because it's quite interesting as well. But first, about disability. So it's any restriction resulting from an impairment that impacts the person to a degree that they cannot perform their normal life like someone who wouldn't have a disability. But invisible disability is actually not defined anywhere. It is not defined by the World Health Organization. It's not defined in the UN. It is something that is very tricky. There's actually a project called the Invisible Disability Project that tried to define it, and they say that for them, an invisible disability is something that is hidden, that we don't know, or that we could not guess at first sight when we see the person that they're battling a disability, which makes it so much more difficult, because if you don't know, if the person doesn't tell you, I have a disability, it's very likely that you don't even know that that person has a disability. How is it looking in the law? So before I start, I know that some people were already in my sessions today, so I can give just the background that I was working in the Swiss government. I was working in the office that is taking care of discrimination and also all laws and all framework that is related to people living with disabilities. And they actually work with invisible disabilities as well. They have laws that are made and programs to rehabilitate people living with disabilities. So they create what we call inclusive workspace, where people have all the things that they need to actually perform their job. And very often, in I think most of the European countries, there's two things. There's one thing, which is the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. It comes from the UN, and it's quite a short document that basically says that that country, by signing this document, agrees that they want to remove as many barriers as possible for people living with disabilities, that they are against discrimination for people living with disabilities. It is very, very, very vague, I would say. So very often what needs to be done is that the country needs to create another law. Since there's many Swiss and that I worked on that document myself, it is actually a very long document where we explain all the different situations. If that person has this, what they need to do. It also explains how protected they are in terms of working, in terms of education. So it is actually quite thorough. And that's the case in many places. Unfortunately, I don't know the situations in all the ESN countries, but I'm pretty much sure that in many of your countries, it is the case that it is working like this. I put a small list of some cases of disabilities, invisible disabilities, so maybe it will make you get a better perspective of what it can be. So as you see, there's kind of types of disabilities, and some of them you might not think are actually disabilities. We see that there are many disabilities that are linked to mental health and that have actually real impairment for the person that is living with them. There's some that are what I like to call learning disabilities, dyslexia, there's also dysphasia, all of this that are actually issues that people are facing when they're studying and is really impacting them, and that is making them as students, like it's a completely different environment for them to learn. And very often it's not recognized enough, and also it's not recognized in our laws. We also have the multiple sclerosis, which is actually what my aunt had. She had multiple sclerosis. But there's also neurological disorders such as epilepsy, brain injuries. There's cancer, which is actually considered as a disability, and autoimmune disease. But that is just a small list. There's actually, I would even say, like hundreds of disabilities that you might have. And very often it's just a tiny fraction of people. But for those tiny fraction of people, it's just a completely different life experience for them. They're impacted in every single aspect of their lives. So it is very tricky. It is impossible to be completely aware of everything that's happening in that domain. So it's very important that we get educated on the topic, that we talk about it, that we should not be hiding ourselves, that people that are living with such disabilities should be proud of themselves, that they should be proud of the step that they're going, that they're actually making the effort to fight for their cases. So yeah, that's the kind of invisible disabilities that I wanted to present, but I think it's still quite not so concrete when I put it like this in small boxes. So I wanted to give you some small examples of what a young person we're living with an invisible disability, so like maybe someone in this room could relate to what their experience is as a student or as a young person. So I have first Alan. Alan is a cool guy. He's 23. He studies medicine, and he really likes playing tennis. He's a very good tennisman, not as good as Roger Federer, of course, but he's quite good. He's quite okay. But Alan has something that is a bit different than most of his classmates. He's actually born with a hearing impairment, and that he actually doesn't hear anything. So it's a complete hearing impairment. So how is it to be Alan? Actually, Alan had many issues. Alan could not have all his classes shaped for him. Alan had to take the classes that he didn't want to take because those classes were the only ones that he could read in a book. Alan had to choose another specialty. He was always so interested in one specialty at his university, but he could never take it because it was not accessible for him. So Alan was very sad, but actually his whole life changed because of his impairment. Then we have Stephanie. Stephanie is 22. She studies chemistry, and she is a very good guitar player. But also, Stephanie is living on the spectrum. And for her, the whole experience of life is completely different. She doesn't perceive things like most people would perceive it. Her emotions are very different. She has completely different ways of living in society. And this is it's a big difficulty for her. And as a student in chemistry, she struggles sometimes to have people around her, to have a strong support system. So that's another example of a person that when people see Stephanie in the class, they're like, oh, Stephanie is acting a bit weird. Actually, Stephanie has something that makes her act that way. Then I have another good example, which is Olga. Olga is 28, and she is an intern in a law firm. And she really likes running, and she's a good runner. But most importantly, Olga lives with type 1 diabetes. So for those that don't really know how diabetes works, there's two types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. Type 1, which is what we call the type of diabetes that you get not because of and you don't get, how to say that? That is something that you get from hereditary reasons, and she had to live with this her entire life. What does that mean for her? It means that she gets dehydrated very often. It means that she needs to go to the bathroom quite often. And as an intern in a law firm, sometimes she feels extremely tired. And her boss, what does her boss think about Olga? The boss just thinks that Olga is lazy. They think that just Olga is just throwing a tantrum, that Olga needs to get her life together. And it's actually because the boss doesn't understand that Olga has a disability because it's not written on her face, disability. And I have a final example of a disability. His name is Arno. Arno is 26. He works as a translator. He likes weightlifting. I'm not saying that he's good at weightlifting, but he likes it. And he lives with epilepsy. So Arnaud lives with a kind of epilepsy that is quite complex to understand. There's two kinds of epilepsy that I think I can say I now, live with. I have absences, which means that when I'm talking to someone, it's likely that sometimes I'm not realizing what's happening and I miss a tiny fraction of what's happening around me. And it's usually a bad sign because it means I will have a really big seizure just after, and I can get injured. I actually burned myself twice. I actually fell off a train. I like to be to be very creative with my seizures, but of course it is something that impacts me. Um, and yeah, how did I started living with epilepsy? Actually, it's not something you get when you're a small child. At least for me, I was 14 when I had my first seizure. I was at school, and I remember feeling like feels so bad. I don't know, something feels off. Um, and I said to my teacher, I want to go home. I really don't feel good. And my teacher and my friends told me, oh, you just want to miss the math test. I wanted to miss that test. That was not the reason why. I actually came back home. I was on the couch. And I was trying to sleep. And I woke up on the floor. And there was ambulances, or how do you call them? The people from the ambulances around me. There was my mom who was talking to me, and she asked me, do you know who I am? And I could not answer. And I was like, I know the answer, but I don't know what's your name. And do you know what day we are? I don't know. And that was the first time I had to experience epilepsy, but it was not the last time. Over time, I had more and more seizures. I couldn't drive anymore. I suffered from discrimination from my disability, but most importantly, and I think it's maybe the case of my NO, most people don't know I have this disability because it's not written on my face. So yeah, this disability has many impacts on me. First, I'm under a very strict diet and monitoring, in the sense that I cannot eat anything that I want. I cannot drink too much. Yeah, I cannot drink too much. I need to sleep enough. If I don't sleep enough, I will feel very dizzy, and it's a very bad signal. I take medicine every day, twice a day. And those medicine that I took had very strong side effects. I gained a lot of weight when I first took it. It impairs my brain, so I'm more slow than I used to be. Also, it's supposed to decrease my memory. I'm a translator, so I think I'm still good with my memory. Yeah, and I experienced discrimination. I lost many friends over my disability because people didn't want to be around me in the car because they were scared, even if I was not the person driving, because they said, no, but it's so dangerous, maybe you will distract the person driving. Now, actually, since I'm 3 years seizure-free, I can actually drive, but still many of my friends are not talking to me anymore because of this. They don't want to get into my car. So yeah, that's what I call experiencing discrimination with my disability. But today I feel like I'm living like a normal person. I have a job, I have a master's degree, I am president of a great NO, or I try to be a president of my great NO. And that's why I say invisible, yes, but unstoppable. I don't think that my disability should restrict me in what I do. I think my disability should be a signal. It should be part of my identity, but it should not be stopping me. As many of the people that have approached me knowing that I have this disability, they always ask me, what can I do? So I will try to give you some tips about how you can approach invisible disabilities. The first thing is creating inclusive spaces. I cannot say the number of times I've experienced places where I felt very unsafe, where I had people making fun of my disability, saying like, oh, I will start doing this with my phone and you will be down. And for me, it's really not funny. I have very bad memories of these times where I got burnt or when I fell from somewhere or when I broke something of my body. So it's very important first to be there, to be listening, to be understanding. I also say don't assume, ask. I'm super happy to explain how it works. I think if I don't explain, it's normal that people don't understand. And yeah, it's okay not to know everything. I don't know as well everything about disability, even though I worked in the field, even though I had to experience this quite a lot. It's totally okay, but it's very important that, that we ask questions, that we are taking care of each other, that we don't assume that because one person is looking okay, that they might not have an issue behind it. But also I wanted to say, why is it so important that we increase awareness on the topic? First of all, because when we increase awareness on such things, we also increase awareness, understanding of each other. So if we're empathetic to other people, then it just makes us better as a community. We have more trust in each other. We can keep on sharing those things. I can also say to my NO, I think they know that I'm very honest and I'm sharing everything because I think sharing is caring. But also that if people are aware of some things, they can detect what's happening. And for me, it was very important also for my current employers that they know what are the signs that I might have a seizure, so they know how to take care of me. They know that they just need to remove everything that's around me so I don't hurt myself. And yeah. And the last thing, which is maybe interesting for you, there's a small sunflower there, which is written just under, I don't know if you can all see, please be understanding. This is actually the sunflower badge that was created by the Invisible Disability Project that I've explained to you before. And it's basically a small badge that you can put here that I should actually wear, I think, today, which basically means that if you see someone with this, you know that this person is living with an invisible disability, and that people can approach you, or that they know that you might have some special requirements or special needs. And yeah, thank you a lot for attending to this very personal session. And yeah, thank you.